From ancient empires to pivotal moments in modern history, our channel offers a unique blend of engaging storytelling and in-depth analysis. Hit the subscribe button now and become part of our growing community of history enthusiasts. Let's uncover the mysteries of the past together. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, also known as the Kingdom of the European Invaders, was one of the states established by the invaders in the eastern region immediately after the first military campaign. It lasted for nearly 200 years, from the accession of Godfrey of Bouillon in the year 1099 until the fall of the city of Acre in the year 1291. Its history is divided into two periods, with a brief interruption in its existence, beginning with its collapse after the siege of Jerusalem in the year 1187 and its restoration following the third military campaign in the year 1192. The original Kingdom of Jerusalem lasted from the year 1099 to the year 1187 before being almost entirely overtaken by the state founded by the military leader Saladin. After the third military campaign, it was re-established in the city of Acre in the year 1192 and became known as the Second Kingdom of Jerusalem, or the Kingdom of Acre, after its new capital. Acre remained the capital until the kingdom's final fall, even during the 2 decades in which the invaders briefly regained partial control over Jerusalem during the 6th military campaign, through the diplomacy of the leader Frederick II with the ruling state at the time. The vast majority of the invaders who established and settled the kingdom came from the Kingdom of France, as did the knights and soldiers who made up the bulk of the reinforcements throughout its existence. Consequently, its rulers and elite were predominantly from France. French invaders also introduced their language to the eastern region, making Old French the common language of the invader states, while the formal language used for official matters was an ancient European language. Although the rural population mainly consisted of local Eastern Christians and followers of Islam, many Europeans, primarily from France and Italy, also settled in villages across the region. In the beginning, the kingdom was little more than a scattered collection of towns and cities captured during the first military campaign. However, at its height in the mid-12th century, it encompassed nearly the territory of modern-day lands of Israel and Palestine, along with the southern parts of Lebanon. The kingdom stretched in a narrow strip along the sea in the west, from the city of Beirut in the north to the southern desert, extending eastward into present-day Jordan and Syria, and westward toward the state ruled by the rulers of Egypt at the time. To the north, 3 other states of the invaders were established during and after the first military campaign: the county of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, and the county of Tripoli. Although these states were independent, they maintained strong ties with the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Further to the north and west lay the Armenian Kingdom of Cilicia and the Eastern Roman Empire, both of which had close relations with Jerusalem in the 12th century. To the east, various ruling territories of followers of Islam existed, ultimately allied with the ruler in the city of Baghdad. The kingdom was ruled by King Amaury of Lusignan, who was also the ruler of Cyprus, another state of the invaders founded during the third military campaign. Dynastic ties also strengthened with Tripoli, Antioch, and Armenia. Over time, the city-states of Venice and Genoa increasingly dominated the kingdom's affairs. The emperor of a European empire, Frederick II, claimed the kingdom through marriage, but his intervention triggered a civil war among the kingdom's nobility. The kingdom gradually became a mere pawn in the conflicts and politics of the ruling states in Egypt, as well as the invasions of forces from Central Asia. As a relatively minor kingdom, it received little financial or military support from Europe. Ultimately, the rulers of Egypt at the time, Baibars and Al-Ashraf Khalil, from the year 1290 to the year 1293, reconquered all remaining strongholds of the invaders, culminating in the fall of Acre in the year 1291. The kingdom was ethnically, religiously, and linguistically diverse, although the invaders established themselves and their descendants as an elite minority following the religious leadership of the West. They introduced many customs and institutions from their homelands in Europe, maintaining close familial and political ties with the Western region throughout the kingdom's existence. The kingdom also inherited certain Eastern qualities influenced by pre-existing traditions and populations. The majority of the kingdom's inhabitants were native Christians, particularly followers of Greek and Syriac Orthodox traditions, as well as followers of the majority and minority branches of Islam. The native Christians and followers of Islam, who formed a marginalized lower class, primarily spoke Greek and Arabic, while the invaders, most of whom came from France, spoke French. There were also small communities of followers of Judaism and a religious group with ancient roots in the region. By the late 12th century, the population of this religious group was estimated at around 1,000 in Nablus, 200 in Caesarea, and 300 in Ascalon, setting a lower bound of 1,500, as other sources also mention communities in Gaza and Acre. The population following Judaism across 14 cities in the kingdom was estimated at around 1,200, making the religious group's population larger than the Jewish one at the time, perhaps for the only time in history. In 1095, Pope Urban II preached the First Crusade at the Council of Clermont to assist the Byzantine Empire against Turks and Arabs and to control the Holy Land. The Byzantines were engaged in wars with the Seljuks and other Turkish dynasties for control of Anatolia and Syria. The Seljuk Empire collapsed into smaller states after Malik Shah I's death in 1092. Malik Shah was succeeded by Kilij Arslan I in Anatolia and Tutush I in Syria. Tutush's sons, Fakhr al-Mulk Radwin and Dukak, inherited Aleppo and Damascus, further dividing Syria among conflicting emirs. The disunity among Anatolian and Syrian emirs allowed crusaders to overcome military opposition on their way to Jerusalem. Egypt and much of Palestine were under the Arab Shiite Fatimid Caliphate, which had extended its influence into Syria before the Seljuks' arrival. Warfare between Fatimids and Seljuks disrupted local Christians and Western pilgrims. The Fatimids, under Caliph al-Mustali and Vizier al-Athil Shahanshah, lost Jerusalem to the Seljuks in 1073 but recaptured it in 1098 from the Artukids, just before the Crusaders' arrival. The Crusaders arrived in Jerusalem in June 1099, capturing neighboring towns like Ramla, Lydda, and Bethlehem first. Jerusalem fell on July 15th. On July 22nd, a council in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre established a king for the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Raymond IV, Count of Toulouse, and Godfrey of Bouillon were leaders of the crusade and siege of Jerusalem. Raymond, wealthier and more powerful, initially refused the crown, possibly to show piety or hoping others would insist on his election. Godfrey accepted the leadership. Uncertainty still prevailed regarding the fate of the new kingdom. The papal legate, Daimbert of Pisa, convinced Godfrey to hand over Jerusalem to him as the Latin Patriarch, with the intention of establishing a theocratic state directly under papal control. According to William of Tyre, Godfrey may have supported Daimbert's efforts, agreeing to take control of one or two additional cities to expand the kingdom, provided that Daimbert was permitted to rule Jerusalem. Godfrey indeed expanded the kingdom's boundaries by capturing Jaffa, Haifa, Tiberias, and other cities, reducing many to tributary status. He laid the foundations for the system of vassalage by establishing the Principality of Galilee and the county of Jaffa. However, his reign was brief, as he died of an illness in 1100. His brother, Baldwin of Boulogne, successfully outmaneuvered Daimbert and claimed Jerusalem for himself as the king of the Latins of Jerusalem. Daimbert compromised by crowning Baldwin I in Bethlehem rather than in Jerusalem, thereby paving the way for a monarchy. Within this framework, a Catholic Church hierarchy was established over the local Eastern Orthodox and Syriac Orthodox authorities. Under the Latin Patriarch, there were 4 suffragan archdioceses in addition to numerous dioceses. During Baldwin I's reign, the kingdom expanded even further. The number of European inhabitants increased as the Minor Crusade of 1101 brought reinforcements to the kingdom. Baldwin repopulated Jerusalem with Franks and native Christians after his expedition across the Jordan in 1115. With assistance from the Italian city-states and other adventurers, notably King Sigurd I of Norway, Baldwin captured the port cities of Acre, 1104, Beirut, 1110, and Sidon, 1111. He asserted his suzerainty over other Crusader states to the north, Edessa, which he had founded in 1097 during the Crusade, Antioch, and Tripoli, which he helped capture in 1109. He successfully defended against Muslim invasions, whether from the Fatimids in the numerous battles at Ramla and elsewhere in the southwest of the kingdom, or from Damascus and Mosul at the Battle of Al-Sanabra in the northeast in 1113. After meeting in Acre in June, the crusading kings Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany, together with Melisende, Baldwin III, and the major nobles of the kingdom, agreed to attack Damascus. Zengi's territory had been divided among his sons after his death, and Damascus no longer felt threatened. An alliance was formed with his son Nur ad-Din, the Emir of Aleppo. Perhaps recalling attacks launched on Jerusalem from Damascus in previous decades, Damascus appeared to be the best target for the crusade, rather than Antioch or another northern city that might have allowed for the recapture of Edessa. The subsequent siege of Damascus was a complete failure. When the city appeared to be on the verge of collapse, the Crusader army suddenly shifted its focus to another section of the walls and was driven back. The Crusaders retreated within 3 days. Rumors of treachery and bribery circulated, and Conrad III felt betrayed by the nobility of Jerusalem. Whatever the reason for the failure, the French and German armies returned home, and a few years later, Damascus was firmly under Nur ad-Din's control. The failure of the Second Crusade had dire long-term consequences for the kingdom. The West was hesitant to send large-scale expeditions. In the ensuing decades, only small armies led by minor European nobles, intent on making a pilgrimage, arrived. Meanwhile, the Muslim states of Syria were gradually united by Nur ad-Din, who defeated the Principality of Antioch at the Battle of Anab in 1149 and seized control of Damascus in 1154. Nur ad-Din was extremely pious, and during his reign, the concept of jihad came to be interpreted as a form of counter-crusade against the kingdom, a stance that impeded Muslim unity both politically and spiritually. In Jerusalem, the Crusaders were distracted by a conflict between Melisende and Baldwin III. Melisende continued to rule as regent long after Baldwin reached adulthood. She was supported, among others, by Manasses of Hyrges, who essentially managed affairs on her behalf, by her son Amalric, whom she established as Count of Jaffa, by Philip of Milly, and by the Ibelin family. Baldwin asserted his independence by mediating disputes in Antioch and Tripoli, gaining the support of the Ibelin brothers when they began opposing Manasses' growing power, thanks in part to his marriage to their widowed mother, Helvis of Ramla. In 1153, Baldwin crowned himself as sole ruler, dividing the kingdom into 2 parts. Baldwin took Acre and Tyre, while Melisende controlled Jerusalem and the south. Baldwin replaced Manasses with Humphrey II of Turin. Baldwin invaded his mother's possessions, defeated Manasses, and besieged Melisende in the Tower of David. Melisende surrendered, withdrew to Nablus, but was appointed regent and chief advisor, retaining influence in ecclesiastical appointments. In 1153, Baldwin launched an offensive against Ascalon, capturing the fortress and incorporating it into the county of Jaffa. This secured the southern border, reducing Egypt to a tributary state under weakened caliphs. Baldwin faced threats from Nur ad-Din in the east and Byzantine Emperor Manuel I Comnenus, who claimed suzerainty over Antioch. To strengthen defenses, Baldwin allied with Byzantium by marrying Theodora Comnena, Manuel's niece. Historians debate Byzantine-Jerusalem relations. Some say Amalric acknowledged Manuel as overlord. Others believe the alliance protected Orthodox Christians. Baldwin died childless in 1162, passing the throne to his brother Amalric. In 1163, Egypt's instability led to a refusal to pay tribute to Jerusalem. Amalric invaded, but withdrew when Egyptians flooded the Nile at Bilbais. Vizier Shawar sought aid from Nur ad-Din, who sent Shirkuh, but Shawar allied with Amalric. Amalric and Shawar besieged Bilbais in 1164, but withdrew when Nur ad-Din attacked Antioch. Nur ad-Din sent Shirkuh back to Egypt in 1166, and Shawar allied with Amalric, who suffered defeat at Al-Babian. Despite this, both sides withdrew, and Shawar remained in control with a Crusader garrison in Cairo. In 1167, Amalric cemented his alliance with Manuel by marrying Maria Comnene. However, in 1168, Amalric sacked Bilbais without waiting for Byzantine naval support, causing Shawar to switch sides and seek Shirkuh's help. Shawar was assassinated, and when Shirkuh died in 1169, his nephew Yusuf, better known as Saladin, succeeded him. Manuel sent a large fleet to aid Amalric in besieging Damietta, but logistical failures forced its retreat, dooming the Crusader-Byzantine alliance. In the end, Nur ad-Din triumphed, and Saladin established himself as Sultan of Egypt. Following the deaths of Amalric and Nur ad-Din in 1174, Saladin was in a strong position to assert dominance over Syria. Subsequent events have been framed as a conflict between two factions: the court party, led by Baldwin's mother Agnes of Courtenay and her European allies, who favored war against Saladin, and the noble party, led by Raymond III of Tripoli, who advocated peaceful coexistence. This interpretation, originally presented by William of Tyre, was later echoed by 20th century historians. However, Peter Edbury argues that the conflict was a dynastic struggle rather than a divide between native barons and European newcomers. Miles of Plansey briefly served as regent during Baldwin IV's minority, but was assassinated in 1174, leading to the appointment of Raymond III as regent. Baldwin reached his majority in 1176, but due to his leprosy, his reign was expected to be short. Succession concerns centered on his sister Sibylla and half-sister Isabella. To secure Western support, Sibylla was married to William of Montferrat, cousin of Louis VII of France and Frederick Barbarossa. However, William fell ill and died in 1177, leaving Sibylla widowed and pregnant with Baldwin V. Raynald of Chatillon was then named regent. Shortly afterward, Philip of Flanders arrived in Jerusalem on pilgrimage. As Baldwin IV's cousin, he was offered the regency and command of the army, both of which he declined, though he objected to Raynald's appointment as regent. Philip also attempted to intervene in Sibylla's second marriage, proposing one of his own retainers, but the native barons rejected his suggestion. Furthermore, Philip seemed intent on carving out his own domain in Egypt, yet he refused to participate in the planned Byzantine Jerusalem campaign. The expedition was delayed and eventually canceled, and Philip withdrew his army to the north. Most of Jerusalem's army marched north with Philip, Raymond III, and Bohemond III to attack Hama, giving Saladin the opportunity to invade the kingdom. Baldwin IV, despite his illness, proved to be a highly capable and energetic monarch, defeating Saladin at the Battle of Montgassard in September 1177 despite being heavily outnumbered and relying on a hastily raised militia. While Baldwin's presence was inspirational, Raynald made the key military decisions. Hugh III of Burgundy was expected to travel to Jerusalem to marry Sibylla, but political unrest following Louis VII's death in 1180 prevented his departure. Meanwhile, Baldwin IV's stepmother Maria, Isabella's mother and Sibylla's stepmother, married Balian of Ibelin. At Easter in 1180, Raymond and his cousin Bohemond III of Antioch attempted to force Sibylla into marriage with Balian's brother, Baldwin of Ibelin. Both Raymond and Bohemond were Baldwin's closest male relatives in the paternal line and could have claimed the throne if the king died without a suitable heir. However, before they arrived, Agnes and Baldwin IV arranged for Sibylla to marry a Poitevin newcomer, Guy of Lusignan. Guy of Lusignan's elder brother, Amalric of Lusignan, was already a prominent figure at court. Internationally, the Lusignans were advantageous as vassals of Baldwin and Sibylla's cousin, Henry II of England. Baldwin also betrothed the 8-year-old Isabella to Humphrey IV of Torrent, stepson of the powerful Raynald of Chatillon, distancing her from the Ibelin family's influence and that of her mother. The ongoing factional dispute within the kingdom influenced the election of a new patriarch in 1180. Following the death of Patriarch Amalric on October 6, 1180, the two leading candidates for succession were William of Tyre and Heraclius of Caesarea. Both were equally matched in terms of background and education, but they were politically aligned with opposing factions, as Heraclius was a supporter of Agnes of Courtenay. The canons of the Holy Sepulchre sought the king's advice, and Heraclius was chosen due to Agnes' influence. Rumors circulated that Agnes and Heraclius were lovers, but these claims stem from the partisan 13th century continuations of William of Tyre's chronicle, and no concrete evidence supports them. At the end of 1181, Raynald of Chatillon raided southward into Arabia, heading toward Medina, though he never reached it. Around this time, he also attacked a Muslim caravan, despite the kingdom being under truce with Saladin. Raynald's actions have often been seen as independent acts of brigandage, though some suggest he aimed to prevent Saladin from consolidating his hold over Aleppo, which would have strengthened his position. In response, Saladin attacked the kingdom in 1182, but was repelled at Belvoir Castle. Despite his worsening illness, King Baldwin was still able to lead the army in person. Saladin attempted to besiege Beirut by land and sea, while Baldwin launched raids into Damascene territory, yet neither side achieved significant results. In December 1182, Raynald launched a naval expedition in the Red Sea, reaching as far south as Rabai. However, the expedition was ultimately defeated, and 2 of Raynald's men were captured and publicly executed in Mecca. While Raynald's campaigns are often regarded as reckless and ultimately detrimental to Jerusalem, historian Bernard Hamilton argues they were a calculated strategy to undermine Saladin's prestige. In 1183, an unprecedented general tax was imposed across the kingdom, an extraordinary measure in medieval Jerusalem and Europe at the time. The tax helped finance larger armies for the coming years, an essential move as Saladin had finally secured Aleppo, allowing him to shift his focus southward to Jerusalem. King Baldwin, now severely incapacitated by leprosy, required a regent, and Guy of Lusignan was appointed as the kingdom's legal heir given Baldwin's dire condition. Guy led the Frankish army against Saladin's incursions, but failed to secure any decisive victory. His opponents criticized him for not seizing opportunities to strike against Saladin when he had the chance. In October 1183, Isabella married Humphrey IV of Torrin at Carrick while the fortress was under siege by Saladin, who may have hoped to capture high-value hostages. Although Baldwin IV was now blind and crippled, he recovered enough strength to resume his rule and military command, leading to Guy's removal as regent. Baldwin's 5-year-old namesake nephew was crowned co-king in November. The ailing king, carried on a litter and attended by his mother, personally led the effort to relieve Carrick. He reconciled with Raymond of Tripoli and appointed him as military commander. The siege was lifted in December, and Saladin withdrew to Damascus. In 1184, Saladin launched another assault, but Baldwin repelled him once again, forcing Saladin to retreat while raiding Nablus and other towns along the way. In October 1184, Guy of Lusignan launched an attack on Bedouin nomad from his base in Ascalon, targeting a group typically loyal to Jerusalem. At the same time, King Baldwin IV contracted his final illness, and instead of Guy, Raymond of Tripoli was appointed regent. His nephew, Baldwin V, was paraded in public wearing his crown, reinforcing his legitimacy as the next king. In May 1185, Baldwin IV finally succumbed to leprosy and passed away. Meanwhile, the succession crisis prompted a mission to the west seeking assistance. In 1184, Patriarch Heraclius traveled through European courts but received no help. He offered the keys of the Holy Sepulchre, those of the Tower of David, and the banner of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. However, both Philip II of France and Henry II of England preferred to remain in their own territories rather than serve as regents for a child in Jerusalem. The few European knights who did travel to the Holy Land saw no combat, as the truce with Saladin had been re-established. William V of Montferrat was among the few who came to support his grandson, Baldwin V. Baldwin V's reign, with Raymond of Tripoli as regent and his great-uncle Jocelyn of Edessa as guardian, was short-lived. A sickly child, he died in the summer of 1186. Following his death, Raymond and his supporters went to Nablus, likely in an attempt to block Sibilla's claim to the throne. However, Sibylla and her supporters moved to Jerusalem. It was decided that Sibylla would inherit the kingdom on the condition that her marriage to Guy be annulled. She agreed, but only if she could choose her own husband and king. Upon her coronation, she immediately crowned Guy with her own hands. Raymond refused to attend the ceremony and, in Nablus, proposed that Isabella and her husband, Humphrey IV of Turin, should be crowned instead. Humphrey refused, as such an act would have surely led to civil war. Instead, he traveled to Jerusalem and swore allegiance to Guy and Sibylla, as did most of Raymond's supporters. Raymond himself, however, refused and left for Tripoli, while Baldwin of Ibelin also rejected their rule, surrendered his fiefs, and departed for Antioch. Raymond of Tripoli allied with Saladin against Guy and allowed a Muslim garrison to occupy his fief in Tiberias, likely hoping that Saladin would assist him in overthrowing Guy. Meanwhile, Saladin had secured his Mesopotamian territories and was eager to launch an attack on the Crusader kingdom, having no intention of renewing the truce upon its expiration in 1187. Before the truce ended, Reynald de Chatillon, the lord of Ultra-Jordan and Carrick, and one of Guy's main supporters, recognized Saladin's military preparations and launched raids on Muslim caravans. Guy was on the verge of attacking Raymond, but realized that the kingdom needed unity in the face of Saladin's threat. Balian of Ibelin mediated a reconciliation between them during Easter in 1187. In April, Saladin launched another attack on Carrick, and in May, a Muslim raiding party clashed with a small Christian embassy en route to negotiate with Raymond, decisively defeating it at the Battle of Cresson near Nazareth. Raymond and Guy finally agreed to confront Saladin at Tiberias, but could not settle on a strategy. Raymond argued against a direct engagement, while Guy insisted on marching out against Saladin directly. On July 4th, 1187, the army of the kingdom was utterly destroyed at the Battle of Hattin. Raymond of Tripoli, Balian of Ibelin, and Reginald of Sidon managed to escape, but Reynald de Chatillon was executed by Saladin, and Guy was taken prisoner in Damascus. Over the next few months, Saladin swiftly overran the entire Crusader kingdom. Only the port of Tyre remained in Frankish hands, defended by Conrad of Montferrat, who had coincidentally arrived just in time from Constantinople. The fall of Jerusalem effectively marked the end of the First Kingdom of Jerusalem. Much of the population, swollen with refugees fleeing Saladin's conquests, was permitted to escape to Tyre, Tripoli, or Egypt. However, those unable to pay for their freedom were sold into slavery, while even those who could pay were often robbed by both Christians and Muslims on their way into exile. The capture of the city triggered the Third Crusade in 1189, led by Richard the Lionheart, Philip Augustus, and Frederick Barbarossa, though the latter drowned en route. Meanwhile, Guy of Lusignan, denied entry to Tyre by Conrad, laid siege to Acre in 1189. During the prolonged siege, which lasted until 1191, many, including Patriarch Heraclius, Queen Sibylla, and her daughters, succumbed to disease. With Sibylla's death in 1190, Guy lost any legal claim to the throne, and the succession passed to her half-sister, Isabella. Isabella's mother, Maria, and the Ibelins, now closely allied with Conrad, argued that Isabella's marriage to Humphrey had been invalid since she had been underage at the time. This claim was further fueled by Humphrey's betrayal of her cause in 1186. The marriage was annulled amid some controversy, and Isabella subsequently married Conrad. Conrad, as the closest male relative to Baldwin V and a proven military leader, had strong support. However, Guy refused to renounce his claim to the throne. When Richard arrived in 1191, he and Philip took opposing sides in the succession dispute. Richard supported Guy, his vassal from Poitou, while Philip backed Conrad, a cousin of his late father, Louis VII. After much tension and deteriorating health, Philip returned home shortly after the fall of Acre. Richard went on to defeat Saladin at the Battle of Arsuf in 1191 and the Battle of Jaffa in 1192, reclaiming much of the coastline, but failing to recapture Jerusalem or any inland territory. Some historians suggest that this may have been a calculated strategic decision rather than a failure, as Richard may have recognized that holding Jerusalem would be a liability due to its isolation from the sea, the main route for Western reinforcements. In April 1192, Conrad was unanimously elected king, but was assassinated by the Hashishin just days later. 8 days after his murder, the pregnant Isabella was married to Count Henry II of Champagne, a nephew of both Richard and Philip, but politically aligned with Richard. As compensation, Richard sold Guy the island of Cyprus, which he had seized on his way to Acre. Despite this, Guy continued to claim the throne of Jerusalem until his death in 1194. The crusade ended peacefully with the Treaty of Ramla in 1192. Saladin permitted Christian pilgrimages to Jerusalem, allowing the Crusaders to fulfill their vows before returning home. Meanwhile, the native Crusader barons set about rebuilding their kingdom from Acre and other coastal cities. Join our journey through history. Support our continuity by clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Join the community of Morasel channel on YouTube and explore the fascinating stories of history. Islamic civilization. Uncover its philosophy, eternal values, and remarkable legacy. Modern European civilization. Witness the inventions and discoveries that transformed the world. Ancient civilizations. Journey through ancient Egypt, the dawn of civilization with its majestic temples. Babylonian legends. Delve into eternal myths that shaped human history. Ancient Greece. Explore the birthplace of philosophy, democracy, and epic mythology, from Socrates and Plato to the glory of Athens and Sparta. Discover how we got here. Be part of our journey.